Okay, so we are with another session of anatomy of a question, and this is for unit 10 of CSIR NET syllabus, that is ecology and environmental biology, and also pollution, which is also part of this environmental biology. So let's take a color first. So I'll show you a few of the questions from this unit 10 part C questions, and we'll try to solve them. Most of the questions of unit 10 are graphical representation, and data interpretation is needed to answer most of these questions. The questions are itself not that difficult, but they mostly rely on some term, some specific concept involving the graphical analysis. So let's begin. This is question number 1. There are 3 species of frogs, A, B and C. Species A does not provide parental care for its eggs and larvae. Species B is subjected to predation by other predator species. Okay. Selectively feeds only a small size larva. Species C faces progressively decreasing opportunities for breeding with the increasing age of their life. Assuming that resources available for reproduction are similar for A, B and C, which of the following strategies would have been favored for the survival for all the species? So there are 4 different strategies are listed, which explains the best favor for all the 3 species for their proper reproduction and growth. So if you read this question, you'll remember one thing. This question is from, small, like as I mentioned, that do not provide parental care for its eggs and larvae. So means this is a reproductive strategy question, and we know there are 2 strategies, R selected and K selected species, and based on the survival at different stages of their life, we can also call it the different type 1, type 2 and type 3 survivorship curves. Okay, so this question is from this part. So if you have prepared this, then you can answer that with basic logic. So we know species A does not provide parental care. That means species A must produce many small offspring to fight against it, for a proper better reproduction and survival. Species B is subjected to predation. So species B is small itself, that's why it's subjected to predation. So species B should produce large offspring for survival. And species C faces progressive decreasing. Okay, I think you cannot see here. So progressive decreasing opportunity at increasing age. So if the age is increasing, the reproductive opportunity for species C is less. So in that case, we can tell that species C should reproduce early in their life. So this should be the 3 different strategies taken for a better reproductive ability and growth of species A, B and C. Okay, so you don't need to even look into any of the options. You can just tell that by reading this question itself, and you should be able to do that. Now let's read the statements which follows all these 3. Option 1, A should produce large number of small sized offsprings. Yes. B should produce a small number of large sized offspring. Yes. C should breed earlier in life. Yes. So all the 3 important properties needed for the reproduction and the strategies must be followed for a proper reproduction is present in option 1. So option 1 is correct. We don't need to read even option 2, 3 and 4 because it's a waste of time, and we find it in the option 1. Thank God we find it in the option 1, because if we fail to find it here, we need to read through all the other options as well. And sometimes, the options are pretty much big to read and even think of the differences between them, but we can answer that quite easily here. Okay, and the rest of the option says that the species A and B should reproduce produce small number large size offspring, which is not true for both A and B, because A, B and C, 3 different species need 3 different strategies for a better reproduction. So it's not going to be true. So now this one, which of the following is correct with reference to the y-axis level and the type of population growth? So the options are listed here. I must divide the options. 1, this is second, this is third. Okay, now read it. For every 3 we have this, one thing, if you look at this, either it's exponential or logistic, and we all know that this is exponential, this is logistic, This is also exponential. There is no doubt about it. The moment we see this graph, we know what we are talking about. And you must know logistic exponential graph. Okay. And we also know that for any type of graph, the graph gets linearized if we plot it against the natural log value in the y-axis, because in the x-axis time, this two time fixed. So obviously in the y-axis we have n, because the growth pattern is always calculated based on n value, right? The total number of individuals that are present in the population. So it will be natural log of n to give a straight line. Curved line we can obtain without any natural log, that is only the change in number that we can easily find out, that is a n here. And in case of this B also, n is provided, so this will be the growth rate G. Based on the number, the growth rate can also be counted there, G. That is, that can be counted based on, you know, it will be counted dn by dt as well in this side. Okay, so there are three ways we can represent a growth curve graph. One is the n by t and the growth. This is exponential growth if we keep n in the y-axis. And this logistic growth, this exponential growth we can get as a natural log value of n with time in the x-axis. But this one, when we have n in the x-axis, then obviously we have dn by dt, or growth rate, or known as capital G, you know, capital G equals to Rn, which, or G can be written as dn by dt equals to R into n. This is what we can see for exponential growth. For logistic growth, we see this Rn k minus n by k. This is how we find that. So if we look at all these options, which option explains our idea? You know, find out this last one where the natural log value of capital N should be placed in the y-axis. So we are finding out the C for the natural log of n. First option contains C with natural log of n. Second option does not have that, so it's not true. Third option not true. Fourth option not true. So the only option is there which carries a natural log of n in the y-axis is option 1, and that's why we choose option 1. We don't need to read anything else even. So you know, sometimes you may get lucky to find out one option. Let's say among these three graphs, if I choose this graph, the first graph, then I may not get the answer that fast, because you know, for all the graph we can find out if n is there, ln is there, dn by dt is there. Still we can get close to the answering the question. But we know that this is for sure. Whenever you have a straight line, that means the natural log is placed in the y, okay, which is the value, like the outcome depends on the x value, that is t. Okay, so that's why we can easily find this answer of this question. So this question need the application of your knowledge as well as, you know, interpretation of the graph, both these things, okay, to understand. Now let's solve this one. Which of the following set of observations is true with reference to a comparison of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystem? Okay, so this question is from ecosystem ecology, particularly the properties of aquatic ecosystem and terrestrial ecosystem. The number of trophic levels is more in aquatic than in terrestrial. The productivity by biomass ratio is higher in terrestrial than in aquatic. Herbivore assimilation efficiency is high in aquatic than terrestrial. Now among this, if we want to find out the difference between aquatic and terrestrial ecosystem, I can tell you that aquatic is a system where the trophic level, number of trophic level is obviously more. Okay, so this statement is true, the first statement. Productivity by biomass ratio means, because productivity means the total amount of net productivity divided by the biomass. Ratio should be less in aquatic, more in terrestrial. It is told that higher in terrestrial. Actually, sorry, I mentioned wrong here. Because the productivity by biomass, if you look at the biomass, the different organisms living in the aquatic environment, it's zooplankton, phytoplankton, zooplankton. So think about them. The biomass is very less weight, very less weight. but the productivity compared to that is very high. So the productivity by biomass ratio is very high for aquatic but very low for terrestrial. So this statement number 2 is wrong for option 1. So option 1 is wrong. Now the third statement, herbivore assimilation efficiency is higher in A than T, that's also true. Why? Because let's talk about assimilation efficiency. Assimilation efficiency equals to capital A by capital C into 100. Capital A is the assimilation and capital C is the consumption. Okay. Assimilation by consumption means food chain efficiencies are well below 100%. So the amount of energy available drops rapidly as it passes along the successive trophic level. We know that. Now the question is, the closer the similarity between the tissue of the consumer and the tissue of the food it eats, the higher the assimilation efficiency. Okay. Now think about that this assimilation efficiency that we are talking about, the assimilation of energy after eating the food, and the same amount that is used there is released from the body. So assimilation can be calculated based on the A equals to C minus F plus U. C is the consumption minus F feces, U urine, plus heat also. So assimilation means the amount that remains inside the body of an organism in a fixed trophic level. Now it changes from one trophic level to the other, and because the heat, the energy is lost as heat as well. But the assimilation is counted based on the consumption minus the total excretion. That's how we count it. So this efficiency, if you think about, is more in aquatic environment compared to the terrestrial environment. Okay. Because aquatic environment is more, we can say aquatic ecosystem is more energy efficient and producing a lot of energy and circulating that throughout themselves. It's more, it's better effective compared to the terrestrial ecosystem. So these two statements are true, but the other one is false. Number of trophic level is more in T than A. So this is wrong. Number of trophic level is more in T. It's also wrong. So all the options are wrong. The only option we left up with is option number 4. Why? The number of trophic level is more in aquatic than in terrestrial. That's fine. This is true. Productivity by biomass ratio is greater in aquatic compared to the terrestrial. That's also true. Herbivore assimilation efficiency is higher in A than in T. Yeah, that's also true. So that's why option 4 is the correct one. You know, this question cannot be answered if you don't have a clear understanding of assimilation, bioassimilation and assimilation efficiency. But without even knowing assimilation efficiency, knowing these two terms, that number of trophic level is more in A than T and herbivore assimilation efficiency is higher. So you need to know these two important properties, and also need to know that the productivity by biomass ratio should be more in aquatic environment. Then only you can answer this question. So it's a tricky one, for not for everyone, not for every single preparation strategy, but still it's a good question. Now another question. Following 4 types of species were observed in a community. Species A has a large effect on community because of its abundance. Species B has a large role in community out of proportion to its abundance. Status of species C provides information to overall health of an ecosystem. D. Significant conservation resources are allocated to species D, which is single, large and instantly recognizable. Now the options given are, you need to arrange the name of the different species from A, B, C, D based on the different names: keystone, indicator, flagship, dominant and all this type. Okay. So now this is a question directly asked from the type of species names, which we have already solved in our class, remember. So if you have attained the class, you could have done that quite easily. Now what it's all about is that you need to understand at least like what is keystone, what is indicator species, what is flagship or dominant. You need to know about that. Okay. So we know that the one thing for sure, that species B has a large role in community. Let's say status of species C provides the information on the overall health of an ecosystem. This species is known as indicator. Let's say we start with this statement, indicator. I know all the 4, but I can start with this. If you know any one, you can start with that. So we know C is indicator. So that means the third one is indicator. Now we are going to find out which option contains third one as indicator. First option, third one as indicator. This is not the answer. This is not. This is also third one is indicator. This is not. So either option 1 or option 3 is correct. 2 and 2 is false. 4 is also false. Okay. No chance. Now let's see the other. Now Species B has a large role in community out of proportion to its abundance, and species A has a large effect in the community because of its abundance. So a species, due to the presence of its abundance, provides a benefit to many other species. This is one scenario in A. In B, without the abundance of that species, okay, means if a species is present, it can help and provide the benefit to thousands of different species even out of the proportion of its abundance. So the second type is keystone species. That's why we're more concerned about it. But the first species, that is species has a large effect on community only because of its abundance. This is a dominant species. Any dominant species have that impact. But a keystone species has an impact out of proportion to its abundance. So this is a keystone species. So B is keystone, and the only option with B keystone and C indicator is first one. Okay, and it says the fourth one, significant conservation resources are allocated species D, which is single, large and instantly recognizable, that is a brand species acting as a brand, that is flagship species. Example, panda is an example of flagship species. Okay, this is how you answer it. Which one of the following is the most appropriate match for the protected areas in India? So we have different biosphere reserve, national park, Ramsar site, wildlife sanctuary, and 5 different protected areas listed instead of 4. So you need to know at least 2 out of 4 as per our 2 out of 4 rule to solve this. So let's say here we know 2. One is we know that the Rajaji is a national park, and we know Loktak is Ramsar site. If you know these 2, you can still answer. Any 2, if you know, you can answer that. So you know, this question may vary for different person because many people live in the different states, and depending upon their states, they know about their different biosphere reserve or wildlife sanctuary. They know about it. So I believe at least 1 or 2 will be something that you can recognize. So let's say Loktak is because it's a lake, Ramsar site. Just like you know, the under Ramsar conservation is Chilka also. Most of the water bodies are under Ramsar conservation. So that is also one reason to select it. So C will be 2. So only option with C with 2 is option 1. And then also Rajaji National Park, that is B with 4, true. A with 3, Biosphere Reserve is Nanda Devi, and Chambal is Wildlife Sanctuary. So yeah, option 1 is the correct one. This is how you find it. You know, selecting one can help you to find out the option from the rest. You know, actually if you look at the question, part C questions are quite easier to answer compared to the part B. You know, upon all those, you know, 6 hours of this lecture regarding the anatomy of a question series that I'm going to provide here, that you're getting this time, I believe you become very well prepared for part C. From now on, you think like me when I'm solving the question in the exam times, so that you just look at the question and think this question mediated approach to solve them. Do not look at any other questions. Select a question, instantly select whether you attain it or not. If you attain, answer it, then leave. If you don't attain, leave it at the beginning. So this is the list provided. Given below is a matrix of possible interactions. Beneficial is plus, harmful is minus, neutral is 0 between species 1 and 2. The names of interactions A, B, C, D respectively are. This is almost the easiest question that you can expect from the community ecology possible in CSIR NET exam. So if you get this kind of questions, you are going to score very well marks, I believe. So this is a direct question from again the portion that we have already studied, that we have this the different species 1 and species 2, and we are looking at the different interactions. So plus means beneficial interaction, minus means harmful interaction, 0 means neutral interaction. So here we have plus and plus means both receives a benefit, that means C. So C where both receives benefit. In what kind of interaction both the species has a chance of receiving benefit? Mutualism. Okay, mutualism. Then let's look at A. Minus, minus, both has a chance to be harmed, that is competition. So once we know, now stop there because you don't need to go with everything, because we know now option can guide us to solve. A is competition. So let's look at A, competition. Option 1 and 2 is wrong. A, competition, and C is mutualism. So the only option where A is competition and C is mutualism is option 3. So third option is correct. Now you can check the rest of the others, like one is getting the benefit, one is harmed, that is predation, B is predation. It's also matching. So this is the correct answer, and you can guarantee your answer after this series, right? So you know about it. So it's listed, you know, all the type of interaction. Amensalism, well, one is unharmed, one is harmed. Commensalism, one gets the benefit, one unharmed. Okay. Which of the following is or are not valid explanations for the observed pattern of species richness? So this is a question from species richness. They can ask you question from richness, which I haven't discussed in that much of details. You know, the basics is enough to answer this kind of question. Older communities are more species rich. The question is, which of the following is not valid? Means false. Which of the following is a false statement regarding species richness? Older communities are more species rich. This is true. Large areas support more species. True. Natural enemies promote reduced species richness at local level. False. Communities in climatically similar habitat may themselves be similar in species richness. True. Greater productivity permits existence of more species. Yes, true. The only thing is false is the statement number C. You know, sometimes this kind of question become very confusing to understand, because many of the terms are there, like richness, like, you know, diversity, and terms that we use almost many occasion in our life. So we don't remember the actual meaning of the scientific meaning of these terms and how they are going to be applicable. So natural enemies promote reduced species richness at local level. Why I said it's false? Because the species richness depends on it means the how many number of species living in that area. Okay, so it does not necessarily depend on the enemy and the abundance of the enemy. Okay, how many enemies present, that doesn't count for a richness. Richness means we are not talking about any predation prey model. We're talking about an ecosystem and how many new species we can attain at a given point of time. That is the richness that we are going to find out. And there is no room for the natural enemy to increase or decrease any richness in that. So that's why we can call the richness. So richness is the number of species per sample in a measure of richness. The more species present in the sample, the richer that sample is called. Species richness as a measure on its own takes no account of number of individuals of each species present. It only matters how many species are present, but how many individuals per species are present doesn't count. It gives as much of weight to those species which have very few individuals as to those which have many individuals. Thus, one daisy has as much influence on the richness of an area of 1,000 buttercups. These are just an example of situation provided. So if species 1 is 1,000 member are present and species 2 only 1 is present, still both of them we can call it the species richness is 2 in this case. So we count the second species as well compared to the species number 1. This is the beauty of species richness. So there is no room for any, you know, enemies to promote the reduction of the species size and all. So there is no way they will go up with it. Okay. Two legs 1 and 2 with a similar trophic structure of phytoplankton, zooplankton, planktivorous fish food chain were chosen. To understand the top-down effect, some piscivorous fish, those that feed on planktivorous fish, were introduced into Lake 1, making the system with 4 trophic levels. Lake 2 was enriched by adding large quantities of nitrate and phosphates to study the bottom-up effect. Over a period of time, changes in the biomass of each trophic level were measured. Now you need to answer a question based on the change in those 2 trophic levels. So we have Lake 1, we have Lake 2. In the Lake 1, what we do, we introduced like piscivorous fish, right? Yeah. In the Lake 2, we enrich it with nitrate as well as phosphate. Okay, in Lake 2. But in Lake 1, now 4 different. So we have phytoplankton, zooplankton, then planktivorous fish, piscivorous fish. Now planktivorous fish eats zooplankton and piscivorous fish eats planktivorous fish. That's why the name came from. Okay, so 4 trophic level is now present in this Lake 1 ecosystem. Okay, so now let's see what we are going to say. So we are introducing this piscivorous fish, right? We introduce this piscivorous fish. So this is the scenario of Lake 1. Lake 2 scenario is added nitrate and phosphate. You know, adding nitrate and phosphate will dramatically increase the biomass for the planktons, because planktons need nitrate phosphate for the proper productivity, and as the productivity of the environment increases, then the zooplankton also increases. In Lake 1, zooplankton biomass increases, that's true. Phytoplankton biomass decreases. Decreases, because as zooplankton increase, obviously they will eat phytoplankton, so biomass will decrease. In Lake 2, both phytoplankton and planktivorous fish biomass decreases. You know, this piscivorous fish eats this planktivorous fish. So as the planktivorous fish population goes down, the zooplankton goes up. As zooplankton goes up, phytoplankton population goes down. So decrease in phytoplankton population, decrease in planktivorous fish. Exactly, the statement 1 is explaining every single phenomena that's going on in Lake 1 as well as Lake 2 ecosystem. If you read it, everything just came together, because in Lake 2 the phytoplankton is producing more, so zooplankton is eating them, zooplankton population increases, phytoplankton population decreases. That's one thing, we already got it. In Lake 1, as the piscivorous fish start eating the planktivorous fish population drops, so zooplanktons increase. As zooplankton increase, phytoplankton population drops, so the biomass will also be dropping. So that's why we already found it in option 1, so option 1 is the correct one. If you look at the other options, in Lake 1 zooplankton biomass decrease, wrong. Lake 1 planktivorous fish biomass and phytoplankton biomass decrease. Phytoplankton biomass decrease, we know, if the phytoplankton is decreased, zooplankton increase, so planktivorous fish biomass will increase, so that's also wrong. In Lake 1, planktivorous fish and zooplankton biomass increase. Zooplankton biomass increase. If zooplankton biomass increase, then planktivorous fish population should also increase. Fine. In Lake 2, both phytoplankton and planktivorous fish decrease. Phytoplankton and planktivorous fish also decrease. In Lake 1, planktivorous fish and zooplankton biomass increase, because what happens here, the zooplankton biomass increases, planktivorous fish also increases. So this option number 4 is also coming very close to explain the situation. But telling that zooplankton biomass increases, it's better to tell that the phytoplankton biomass also decreases, rather than planktivorous fish and involvement of planktivorous fish, because if zooplankton increases, then obviously planktivorous fish population will increase slowly. So this kind of a question has an ambiguity, that either option 1 or option 4, but option 1 is properly following it, option 4 also it's following it to certain level, so both can be the option. Generally if there is any disparity of this kind of questions, then they select answer to both as it is. Okay, so that's it.